Welcome to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. Join attorneys James Moore, Kevin Littlejohn, and Mysty Blagg as they explore law, technology, and persuasive arguments. Sit back, relax, and listen to your zealous advocates.
Welcome to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. I'm Mysty Blagg, healthcare attorney here at Shipman & Wright, and I'm joined by my co-hosts today, Tom Harvey and Kevin Littlejohn. And we have some wonderful guests for you today. We have Mike Murray and David I'm going to mess that up. David Roberts of Veritext. Thank you guys for coming on board today. So today we're going to focus a little bit on talking about technology and depositions. We have Mike Murray, who is the Director of Technical and Creative Solutions for Veritext. He hosts a lot of continuing legal education programs to help teach people about using the different technologies. So Mike, nice to have you today. We also have David Roberts.
That last
David,
name is killing me.
I'm going to mess you up
David
all
Roberts.
day. I'm just going to call you David from here on out, who has been immersed in the court reporting culture for his whole career here. And so he brings all of that information and knowledge forward into his career at Veritext. So thank you for being with us today. I just want to start off, just tell us to begin with, Mike and David, in broad strokes, what does Veritext do?
Well, I can jump in. So we are a court reporting company at our core. We're nationwide and have all the major markets, but one of the parts I really like, and maybe I'm biased because of my role here, is the embracement of technology. It's really important at our firm. But at the core, it's providing transcripts either in deposition, sometimes in court, mediation. That is our main business.
Right. And so the pandemic really pushed forward developing some remote deposition technology that you guys were, I had a lot of experience with you in that realm. And I think you're almost at the forefront of that technology, in my opinion. So I think that was wonderful. So depositions, as we know, have changed a lot over the years.
Yeah.
I think people
much.
still envision certain things when we talk about depositions. Kevin, what did you think when the first time you saw the court reporter in the room, like using this little thing to talk into?
It was interesting because when I graduated law school, it was as COVID was still developing. And so there were only remote depositions at that point in time.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I ended up having a construction defect case maybe an hour or two away that the lawyers were older lawyers. And we always talk about how the old guard of the legal profession likes to have things done the old-fashioned way. Demanded that we do an in-person deposition in the middle of COVID. And we had to get this case done. So we ended up, everybody sending in COVID test results. Everybody was negative. We came in, and I was used to seeing the typing stenographer.
Yeah.
And she pulls up, and she's got this little mask in her face, and she was a great court reporter, sweet lady. But I thought I could hear her just in the background, just. I'm like, it wouldn't throw me off, but I'm fascinated by she's just going and going. So I thought it was interesting to hear, but it's certainly a nice development in the field. I would assume it makes it probably more accurate to be able to just speak into that voice command system rather than typing it down. So it doesn't bother me now when I see it. I don't see it too often still, though. I still see most of the time the typing, but
right.
I'm a fan of it.
Well, David, as the pandemic came forward, were you guys ready to make this pivot, or had you already had a lot of the plans in place, or was it like, let's scramble and let's come up with some stuff that we can really get out there and help lawyers?
It's interesting. We've been talking about remote deposition technology for far longer than COVID. We've had it in place probably since 2010. But as you can imagine, when COVID happened, it changed overnight. And I would say within 14 days, we, meaning the company, everybody in the company, was training lawyers across the country on how to participate and how to take depositions. It was kind of funny, right? So Kevin, that first week, everybody's hanging out. We're like, all right, this will pass. We'll all go back to in person in a week or so. And next thing you know, the next week we get these calls. And we had it ready to implement, and it was really a blessing that we were able to do that to help litigation continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And creatively, like, what was the feedback you were getting, and how did Veritext sort of use that feedback and quickly implement new creative solutions?
Well, literally, we got on calls, Zoom calls with lawyers across the country in groups. And so we already had something in place called Exhibit Share. It's grown immensely even since the pandemic, and Mike can talk to that and showcase that as well, but is a paperless solution for depositions. And frankly, you don't have to be remote. Even if you're in person, it really does make sense to get rid of those paper boxes. Kevin mentioned construction defect. Back when I was a court reporter for many years, all I did was travel on construction cases. They would fly me with them, and I would carry those boxes and boxes around of all those documents, right? And the lawyers would always laugh. There's Dave. He's late because he's got to carry the 12 boxes, right? But Exhibit Share takes all of that and gets rid of it and puts it into a digital format that all the parties can share, okay, and introduce exhibits in real time. They can even collaborate and mark on them. So to me, the concept of keeping paper exhibits should be one that really is questioned at this point.
Yeah, Tom, what do you prefer when you're in deposition? Would you feel comfortable with using electronic exhibits if you were in person?
Well, yeah, I think it's really gone to almost exclusively that way for the depositions I've been conducting, for sure. I mean, obviously there are times where certain documents have to be in hard form, particularly if you're trying to do some sort of illustrative exhibit where you need a witness to mark something up. But absolutely, and that kind of, my question for Mike and Dave is, what I really want to know is, how do you see this technology transforming from a conference room deposition or even remote deposition into courtroom applications? Obviously, we've seen the extreme speed of development of technology for these remote depositions and the court's rapid acceptance of it. Do we see that these technologies might be available for courtroom testimony or even remote testimony for a courtroom setting?
Yeah, Mike, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd say definitely. We have actually already started seeing it used in some courtrooms. I mean, we don't often provide the reporters to courtrooms, but a lot of our clients used it earlier in the process, and they were like, we want to keep this going so that we can get the judges all the documents. You don't have to worry about boxes. And then remote witnesses. We see tons of that in trials where we have to set up a remote connection for a witness and being able to share the documents. I mean, kind of like what we talked about earlier, moving to Zoom was easy. Everybody's like, okay, I can get Zoom, but how do you deal with the documents? And so I think like you said, the courts have been also struggling with that. So I think it's a tool with slight modifications can definitely be used in a courtroom. And we're starting to see it. They kind of are making the changes to make it work.
I've got a question, and this will be a question that maybe it'll be difficult for you two to answer given your interest. But what is the value of having an in-person stenographer in a deposition or in a courtroom taking down the transcript, if that could be done by AI or just some sort of computer program that could just sit there and hear what the lawyers are saying, what the judges are saying, and just taking it down? What is the additional value that the stenographer provides in creating a record?
That's a good question. That's a hard one, but it's interesting you brought up about mask reporters, the people who speak into that little thing. One of the things we've seen is that the court reporting industry is changing. There is not enough stenographers or people going to stenography school, just period,
That's
to
a good point.
to meet the growth of the legal field. And so we're trying to hire as many as we can, but they're just not out there. And so we've been forced to explore other avenues of, capturing testimony, one of them, being recording. But the thing that we still see at the core of it is having a deposition officer there, somebody who can act as a neutral party to ensure that not only is an accurate record, but, exhibits are handled properly, the witnesses authenticated properly, all those extra things that go on top of just getting down the testimony. And we feel like that is probably going to be a long time before that goes away and it's completely automated, just because of those tasks that, really important to have a person in the mix doing.
So I want to jump in real quick, and David, maybe we can get your opinion. You're a stenographer, right? You speak or read steno. Are you a purist at heart, or have you come around to adapt some of these and welcome some of these changing ways into the profession?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, actually. Yeah, no, I've always been open to other means of capture, right? Even when I was graduating from college in around 2000, there were 10 court reporters in my class. I was the only one to finish. So it's literally about a 10% pass rate. And that goes back far, back to the 80s even. I come from a family of court reporting. My father, my stepmother, my aunt, my little brother.
Legacy.
Keep it in the family, as we said, right? But, I think that we have to have a means. And one of the things that I love about our company, Veritext, is that we have adapted and created a whole solution around this called DR, digital reporting. And we have digital reporters across the country. It's a real thing, this shortage. And the question comes up at times to say, hey, Kevin, we're having trouble finding a court reporter. Can we lob somebody in remotely? Are you okay with a mask reporter? Are you okay with a digital reporter? These are things that all lawyers have to be open to, because the days of calling and saying, hey, I need somebody tomorrow, calling today, for a 10 a.m., it's challenging.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I had a clip. Tom, do you have time to pull up that clip? What's a photocopier? Yeah, he's gonna look for that, and you guys may have seen it already. So this is available on YouTube, and basically it's a actual deposition transcript that's been acted out, and they are reading verbatim from the transcript. And so what's sort of going on? If we'll go to minute 5:35,
I want to make sure that that's what's at issue.
And I'll just lead you up to it. Is they're arguing over the witness answering what's a photocopier. Do you have a photocopier in your office? And there's all this banter going back. And I wanted to show this clip for two reasons. Is it kind of shows the traditional deposition environment that we still see at times, and it also shows what you were just speaking to. Is it's good to have a neutral party in the room at times. It can get very heated in a deposition. I know Kevin and I have experienced that as well, and it's hard to know what's the best way to handle when somebody is being a little bit aggressive with the witness.
Well, I agree. I like when you have a stenographer in the room who's got a great deal of composure, because when the other side begins to become a bit unhinged, you and the court reporter sometimes will catch eyes and they'll be like, okay, this guy's being a bit abrasive or harassing to a witness. Right. And good court reporters, even though they keep the record clean and they want to capture everything, they're pretty good with allowing parties to go off the record and resolve issues that don't necessarily need to be captured in the court. I mean, in the transcript. So I think Tom's ready for that.
Yeah, let's pull it up and let's watch it.
Do you have machines there where I can put in a paper document, push a button or two, and out will come copies of that paper document also on paper? Do you have such a machine?
Yes, sir.
What do you call that machine?
Xerox.
I just love this. This clip is actually about 6 minutes long, and they're going back and forth. But David, have you ever been in those uncomfortable moments, and do you have a funny story you can share with us?
Well, I just want to jump in real quick and congratulate Misty on integrating video into an audio medium. So that's always goes over great.
Yes, very impressive there. First of all, I've never seen that clip. And Mike, I think you and I need to get a copy of that and implement that into some of our CLEs that we give. Yes, I've been in many depositions where it's gotten pretty uncomfortable, honestly. One that comes to mind was an interesting scenario. I showed up to the deposition site, and there's a big sign on the door that says no firearms allowed. And I had been to this law firm several times and never seen that sign. And of course, as a court reporter, I always get there, 30 minutes early. So I walked in and asked the lawyer, who I knew very well, I said, did something happen recently here? Did somebody bring a firearm or something like that? And they said, no, we know this witness likes to carry firearms and as we've been told has carried them to depositions before. So we wanted to put her on alert and we are going to ask her about it. And by the way, you're sitting next to her. And I said, I appreciate that, guys. Thanks so much.
So, David, a question I have about that, it kind of relates to the clip, and obviously the individuals in the clip were getting a little animated. When you're in a deposition and you're there as the stenographer, you're there as a neutral arbiter to just kind of record what happens, what kind of obligation do you feel to somehow capture the tone and tenor if it starts to become clearly aggressive on one side or the other?
Yeah, well, it's hard. I mean, it's very hard. And I would tell you, if anybody thinks that you're going to have an aggressive deposition, aggressive witness and or opposing counsel, I would suggest videotaping it, first of all.
Oh, that's a good point.
We can only do the best that we can on black and white, and we can't really show emotions, right? And you can't show it through paper. So again, as the unbiased, impartial court reporter, we have to maintain being level-headed the whole time. And as you guys know, I mean, some of these cases are horrific.
Yeah.
With people who have died, death cases. I mean, I can't tell you how many mesothelioma cases that I took of people dying on the bed, and it's I still remember it. But we have a job to do, like you all have a job to do.
That's true. That is true. Mike, I wanted to ask you a question. So I love to talk about technology. I drive Kevin just a little bit crazy talking about it. But do you ever envision a day where we'll use augmented reality to actually have us feel like we're in a room together? And I just think that's a neat concept to think about.
It is interesting, and it's, becoming really big in the news with Apple announcing their, Vision Pro and, with Meta getting into the Oculus.
Right.
So I think right now it's a little too bleeding edge technology. It is, we have tried depositions, not real ones, mock ones in the metaverse, and it's not quite there. You're having conversations with little cartoon characters and things like that.
Yeah.
It's not going to really fly for a deposition. But I do see that there probably could be a time in the relatively near future where, people look more like people, and it definitely becoming, a much more immersive way to, have a deposition. I also think probably a better use case for it would be maybe experiencing exhibits and things like that you can't bring into the room. So maybe it's a large engine from a jet or something, and you can't, bring that into your deposition room. But, if everyone has phones or tablets, they can kind of use augmented reality to kind of view that three-dimensional object, or even put on VR goggles and actually be in the space and see what it's like. I still think those are pretty bleeding edge. I haven't seen any of those in a deposition. We've been, creating fake examples and kind of like concept car things we could think it could be used for, but I mean, it's interesting. There's a lot of tools out there, and I think there's a lot of tools looking for a use, and trying to keep jurors' attention, trying to make things interesting, dynamic, capture your story better. I think these things, they're going to help. But I'm also a total tech person, and so any reason to get a gadget.
And we sort of posed this question on the last episode that hasn't dropped yet. Is one of the advantages about being in person in deposition is that you can read nonverbals better. Yeah. So I was wondering if AI is ever going to be able to help with that in the remote situations. Read eye movements, read breathing, sort of give you nonverbal information. And would that, Tom, would that be a benefit?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, I think Kevin probably favors in-person depositions maybe a little bit more than I do. I think it's important to be able to read people. I think it's important to be able to see how they physically react to questioning. But given the choice, I still prefer a remote deposition. The little I gain from being able to see somebody's eye dilation or how they fidget in the moment in the room, I think is outweighed by the benefit I have by having everything I need at my fingertips. I can prepare all day long that I'm going to use depositions 1 through 25 or exhibits 1 through 25. And if the deponent says something kind of crazy, I can go into my files, all my discovery information, and pull out exhibit 26 I didn't know I was going to need right there in my office. So I do see a lot of benefit to being remote.
Yeah. So, Mike, do you think there's ever going to be a moment when we can have, nonverbals, AI help us with that?
Who knows with AI these days? I mean, they're always coming up with something new. I think it will be. I'm hesitant on that because of the, interpretation it's going to have to do, based off of just video. But, one of the things, it's not AI, but what we've seen is people start to use 360-degree cameras. So, so they can see the whole room, in case anybody's coaching the witness, things like that. So not AI, not kind of telling you, but you're at least getting a bigger picture of what's going on and trying to make it closer to an in-person deposition where you really know, is there somebody sitting, on the other side of the computer holding up index cards with the answers and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kevin, what do you think are the pros and cons of, I know you favor in-person, so maybe you're the pros for in-person, but how do you balance it out?
Well, I favor in person for complex cases, high value cases. I favor it in that arena because the stakes are high, and I like to be there in the room with everyone so everyone can appreciate not only the substance of the case, but the appropriate magnitude of the moment. Because I think there's a lot that goes into an in-person deposition from a nonverbal cue perspective that allows you to see what someone will be like as far as temperament will be on the stand, what a lawyer's temperament may be with respect to making objections and things of that sort. But for your, maybe some smaller value cases where, we largely aren't disputing much of the facts and we're just going through trying to establish a record for maybe summary judgment, certainly I think the convenience of a remote deposition is fine. And then I think if for a witness's perspective, a lot of times, because most witnesses, as you know, Tom and Missy, haven't been deposed much.
Right.
They get into these depositions where they're in a law office or a big conference room and they're uncomfortable. Yeah. They're I can't remember because they're just so focused. And so to get them in an environment where they're comfortable, they're used to it, they may be more likely to feel comfortable developing testimony. So I mean, I see that in certain situations, but. Yes. I think it just depends on the type of case, what's at stake, and you're right. I
think it's a strategic choice now. I think that's an important point. There's some strategy there. David, I'll send this question your way. So, what are you hearing from your Veritext customers? Are they enjoying the option of remote depositions? Are they liking it more? What's their feedback?
They like the options. I want to say one thing to Kevin back to that last conversation. It's harder to intimidate somebody via Zoom as opposed to in person as well, right? Let's be honest. I think I've listened to you enough. I think that might be part of your strategy, which I appreciate. But no, the lawyers have really adapted to the technology. They enjoy having the flexibility of it, especially on a larger case. A lot of time on these construction cases, we might have 3 or 4 people show up, but we'll have 12 people on via Zoom. Mm-hmm. We call it a hybrid deposition, right? Maybe you have a small player that did the, whatever the flooring that really isn't a big dispute. The client doesn't want to pay for you to travel to Charlotte, North Carolina for the in-person. So I think that in that regard, the flexibility has added a lot. And then sometimes if you're dealing with a strict deadline, I mean, remember the days 5 years ago when you might travel to Texas on Tuesday, up to Minnesota on Wednesday, and then back over to Charlotte, North Carolina on Thursday for 3 depositions. Well, now you can do all of those in one day if it's remote, right?
Yeah, absolutely. With a better cost for your client, right?
Right. Exactly.
I will say I've had that cut the other way where, I represent an international client who's sued by another international party and they happen to sue them here in the Eastern District of North Carolina. And part of our strategy is we wanted the plaintiffs who brought this lawsuit to have to fly from Malaysia here to Wilmington, North Carolina to sit for a deposition. But there's no way in this day and age with the technology that it is and the ease of remote depositions that a court was ever going to order that to happen. So that, some of that gamesmanship that it really helps you a lot of the times can sometimes cut against you if you've got a strategy.
Oh, that's a very good point. Well, let's think about you guys' new innovations coming. I think, Mike, you mentioned the 360-degree camera. What are some other things that Veritext has in the works?
Yeah, so a couple of things. We're doing a lot with exhibits, moving to this virtual world, really being able to capture exhibits in a more interesting way. And so some of the things we're playing around with is photogrammetry. So being able to take either video from an accident, scene or photographs, and then recreate that in a three-dimensional model that can be, animated or moved around, and it's actually based on the actual photograph, so you're getting a really accurate representation of that. And then that kind of builds into what we were saying before about maybe that's being displayed in augmented reality, where you're holding up your device and viewing it on the table, or again virtual reality. That's some of the more cutting edge stuff. Some of the more probably earlier stuff is exploring AI. We don't, I can't share everything yet, but one of the advantages of AI that I'm sure people have noticed is its ability to summarize things and pull out key moments, salient points, almost instantly. And so, that's definitely something we're looking at, to provide lawyers with, a leg up in starting their digest and summaries and things like that.
Is anybody using AI yet where they can, and it would definitely have to be a private version that's not publicly sharing data, but to drop a deposition transcript in an AI platform and have it really pull out some key issues with the deposition? Has anybody seen anyone doing that yet?
No. Well, is that what ClearBrief is doing though?
I don't know that they're quite doing that where they're spotting issues.
Well, I mean, Kevin tells a story, and I don't know if Mike and Dave have seen this or been a part of it, but the analog version of that is somebody who just yells bonanza every time they get a good answer.
Abracadabra.
Some crazy word to appear in the index so you can easily find that key part.
You yell abracadabra after a good answer, and you just go to the transcript index, and every time you see abracadabra, you got your response right there. Which is, I forgot where James and I witnessed that. It was insane, or somebody did it, but it's interesting to see how different lawyers develop a transcript. And that was kind of what I was going to ask you, Dave, from a court reporter's perspective. Can you just give us some insight on the do's and don'ts that you've seen throughout your career on how to be an effective advocate during a deposition?
Yeah, one thing that my father always taught me was to kind of coach the witness before we go on the record, even though most of the time the lawyer does as well. But basically just that we're here as an impartial party. I have no idea what your case is about at all and have no stake in this at all. Please wait for the attorneys to finish their question before you start your answer. If I ever interrupt you, it's not to be rude or throw you off. It's maybe that I didn't hear something that you said. And I always noticed, and I always taught our reporters the same to do that it would put the witness at ease, right? Like, and these are witnesses that y'all were referring to earlier that haven't been deposed much. I'm not going to do this to an expert engineer that is constantly being deposed, right? But they always appreciated that. And then when they heard you do that as well, they really followed that rule. And that makes for a much cleaner record. Because there's nothing worse than when you're in court having to read back testimony and there's all these interruptions back and forth between the Q&A.
Agreed. Now, from your perspective observing lawyers, what have you seen from the lawyers that you thought to be the most effective way to develop a transcript through a deposition? Because I've heard people do sometimes they want to go broad and then narrow it down, after some point, or some people just have specific points they want to address. What do you find to be the most effective way? Or most persuasive way?
I think it's changed over time, and I think it's because of the jury and their attention. I did a lot of trial work as well, but I found over the last decade that the lawyers that really get into the points of the argument and get right to it, it's far more effective. I've seen lawyers that took 5-hour depositions that they probably could have been done in an hour and a half, and now I've seen lawyers doing that. Of course, I would prefer a much longer record, right? We get paid by the page. I think that the effectiveness of that is something to think about, and especially if you're going to be in front of a judge and jury.
That's good.
And I'll say, I don't know that really speaks to your question, Kevin, about the record, but the way I think about it too is I try to keep in mind, and I don't know if Mike and David can speak to this or see this, but the audience that you're talking to with the deposition, obviously you're deposing the witness, but keep in mind, I always try to keep in mind that, okay, a jury might hear this. I might need to be persuading the jury. A judge might read it. I need to make sure I'm persuading the judge. But also, if I'm deposing a party or even just an expert witness, the party's probably going to read this transcript, and I want the party to realize that my case is stronger than theirs and to try and force their hand towards settlement. So I got a lot of individual audience members that this deposition is geared towards focusing on.
And I'll add something on that. I started doing and found it to be effective, remembering that I'm going to read this transcript as well. and I say that because when, early on when I would get the transcripts back and begin to write the memorandums for the summary judgment hearing, I would find myself having such a sporadic line of questioning where I would be pulling from page 1, then page 218 and page 30, all in the resuscitation of the facts of the case. Mm-hmm. And I think I've talked about it with Tom. Now I try to really keep in mind as I'm deposing someone the flow that I want my brief to be in if I were to write a summary judgment motion. And so I'll go through chronologically the sequence of facts one by one. So when I get that transcript, I can really just cite the transcript page 1 and then and then I might go to page 2, and I've got all my facts laid out, and then it makes it so much easier, I think, to write a transcript that way if you keep that in mind as you're deposing someone, or write a brief that way.
That's a really good point, Kevin, that I really hadn't considered. Yeah. So what's your best deposition prep technique? Are you an outline person? Is it a detailed outline? What are you doing?
A deposition prep, I'm talking to Tom, talking to James. I'm calling experts. I'm calling everybody.
My issue is it depends on what posture you're in. If you've noticed the deposition, you're driving the ship. I've got a really detailed outline. I mean, it starts with good morning and have you ever been a part of a deposition before? If I'm defending a deposition and I'm going second, it's hard to prepare. You want to have a good grasp on the facts, but you don't know where that other attorney is going to lead you and what you're going to have to either clean up or follow up on.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a deposition standpoint, definitely different between lay witnesses and expert witnesses. I think from an expert witness perspective, and I'm sure Dave and Mark, you'll agree, I do not try to be the smartest person in the room. I try to make sure I understand the language and the terminology that's going to be used. But oftentimes my first 2 hours is clearing up things that I may not understand in the report. and then I'm just sitting there from that point forward, taking the knowledge that I've gleaned from other people just to kind of poke holes or figure out where I can poke holes at. But for lay witnesses' perspective, I think, and Tom and Misty, you all know, all it is building rapport. It's, hey, I'm not here to win or lose today. I'm just here to know. I'm just here to learn what you know. That's all it is.
So Mike, you do a lot of teaching. We talked about that. So what are the pain points that people have talked about in remote depositions, and how do you better train them and get them prepared for those?
Yeah, so the first thing I can think of is, where the witness is, kind of like what I was talking earlier, are they being coached? Who else is behind the camera? There's a lot of concern about that because you can only see, this much of what's going on. So what, previously before 360 cameras, I would just teach people to kind of put it in your admonitions, just put it in, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. And then if you see them, looking off camera, ask them what they're doing. Wasn't a beautiful solution, but it did work. Then these 360 cameras, they're also called nanny cams because you can kind of keep an eye in the room, are starting to solve that. The other issue is documents and exhibits. That was the biggest one, making sure that witnesses, because, a witness is never going to use this technology or probably hasn't unless they're an expert. But so making sure that a witness not only knows how to use the technology, but is in a place that can, if they're at home, do they got good Wi-Fi? What kind of location are they in? And I always tell people there, just do a little prep with your witness. Say, hey, let's get on Zoom, even if it's your free Zoom account. Let's see, how the background looks. Do you have enough lighting? Because we have seen, oh my God, the craziest remote depos. My favorite was somebody, using their phone, like in the driver's seat, looking way down, taking the entire deposition off of their phone. And it's like, wow. So, those, I think the biggest challenges, witnesses getting good quality video at the end, because if you're not going to have a videographer right there with the witness, and you do want to use that video in trial, which is another thing. We see a lot of people just utilizing record and Zoom versus having a videographer. And, we're starting to see cases. One of them comes to mind is Elkhorn versus City of Chicago, where they're not allowed to use that as evidence in the case if they don't have an actual, videographer there. So
they didn't
that's
notice
been a
it.
big gotcha.
Yeah.
And if they noticed it, just hitting record on Zoom doesn't cut it.
I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, that was an issue. That's a really excellent point.
Yeah.
Do we all remember the lawyer cat?
Oh yeah,
that was sad. I didn't laugh at that. I thought that to me, that hit me emotionally.
I'm not a cat.
I thought about my
That's
grandparents.
painful to watch.
Yeah.
I know, but it brought about an important point that older attorneys sometimes it's really difficult for them to adopt to new technologies. So is that one of the, what's your role in that, kind of teaching somebody, how to work with the technology itself? Do you guys have a emergency phone line people call or anything?
Yeah, so all those things. So even to kind of build off of what David said in the beginning, we were doing so many one-on-one hand-holding trainings with attorneys. They'd be calling up, our office staff or sales staff, hey, can you show me how this works? So that is often the first go-to is, let's just get in here and let me just show you. Let's do a practice, deposition. We actually created a new role we call a concierge technician. Basically, it's just a technician who's in your Zoom meeting. So if and that's all they do. So if somebody has a technical issue, we see a lot of people doing it for the first couple of depositions in a case so that everybody can kind of get comfortable. And then they go, okay, we got it from here. And then, of course, having CLEs that go over some of the technology and then tutorials. I mean, we tried to give, everything in the kitchen sink to help people kind of transition. But I think the most effective, like David said, has been the one-on-one, just going one by one and showing people how it works.
Did I do like workshops or anything like that?
Well, like where we have a bunch of people come in and
yes, sir.
Yeah, that's a good idea. No, we do our CLEs.
Listen, I'm an idea guy. I'm an idea guy. Mike, bring me on. I'm telling you, I got it for you.
We'll have you in the workshop. That would be actually way more efficient to train a lot of people at once. So now I'm kind of rethinking things here.
And those are really the tangible skills, I think, that as law students we were thirsty for, and as young attorneys that we wished were there. I know I certainly love workshops. Anytime I can get in there and put my hands on and do, learning in that environment, I really love it. Yeah. So when we're talking about technology, you talked about this, was it photography? Photogrammetry. I knew I was going to screw it up.
That's a tough one. It's a tough
First time I ever heard that word, actually. I'm not even sure it is.
But Tom, does that bring in any concern about how am I going to admit that into evidence? Is that going to, as we increase technology like that, is that going to be a problem?
So I think it's actually something that, believe it or not, has been done a lot in the past. You've seen, and when I was a prosecutor, we used to do this. You would have video reconstruction of accidents where you could go in, and the state crime lab here in North Carolina has great video and photo technology where they can basically place a camera in the center of a crash scene, scan the whole area, and then reverse engineer the crash from there. And so it's just like any other kind of expert testimony or admission of any other kind of photographic evidence. You've got your foundational questions you've got to lay the predicate. But if you can show to a judge that you can lay a proper foundation and that it's
accurate and
reliable and will aid in the testimony. Now, obviously, a lot of this stuff isn't going to be, quote, straight up, evidence, but it will be.
It could be illustrative to a jury.
That's what I was trying to say. It'd be illustrative.
Yeah,
I like it. I mean, you see it all the time, especially in like your catastrophic death cases when you're reconstructing, something that's been so catastrophic where you're really trying to, really develop pain and suffering or something of that sort. You'll see it all the time, or how gross something could have been when you could have stopped, or hit the brakes or something crazy. I see it all the time.
I mean, it's still true. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
Amen.
I mean, because the jury can really envision what is going on. So, we've been talking a lot about the importance of depositions, that, technology is a strategic choice at this time, remote depositions. But let's talk about why a deposition is so important, because Sherry Belts, our first guest we had on, said if you're going to spend any money, spend it on depo prep of your witness. Agreed. So Tom, tell us why, in the grand scheme of things, for law students or for lawyers that do not do, a lot of litigation, why is getting facts on the record so important?
Well, it's not. Well, I guess I'll separate those. The witness prep, I think, and David and Michael kind of hit on this. The last thing you want is for your client in deposition to lose their cool, to be the one who's the aggressor in the room, or to, kind of show a negative side of their personality, because that emboldens the other side to say, oh, this guy's going to be a terrible witness. I mean, I had a fairly recent deposition where my client basically told the opposing counsel that his questions were stupid and he wasn't going to answer them anymore. And really, that doesn't go over well. So I think if you could prep your witness to say, look, this is not going to be a fun 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. It's not going to feel great. You're not going to love it, but this is going to be the hardest part. And if you can keep your cool, if you can show that you're calm, cool, and collected and can answer these questions, again, that's speaking to one of those audiences. That's speaking to the opposing party that says, ooh, this is going to be a tough witness. We don't know that we really want to put him on the stand. We don't want to have to go, put him in front of a jury. If opposing counsel walks out there going, oh, man, I can get under his skin and this is going to be fun in front of a jury. Yeah. So that's a problem. As far as prepping a witness, look, the witnesses know the facts of the case usually much better than you do, particularly if they're a party. You don't want to put answers in their head. You don't want to coach them to answer a question in a way that might be deceiving. But if you can tell them that, look, just show up, tell the truth. You're not going to win or lose the case in that room, but don't, come across as an aggressor. Just keep your cool. Then I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. So, Kevin, why don't you talk about the standard for summary judgment and why it's important to have facts on the record in a deposition? How, as lawyers, do we use that?
Right. So when you're moving for summary judgment or defending for summary judgment, you essentially told the judge that there are no longer any genuine disputes of material fact. Therefore, the case can now be decided as a matter of law based upon the record or the discovery. Mm-hmm. So with that, and that's coming, you really want to get into the deposition to, like Tom said, grasp the facts. Because if you can go ahead and develop through, deposition testimony of 4 or 5 witnesses, one, you cut the cost down of litigation by being able to have the issue decided at summary judgment as opposed to trial. 5
hours in a conference room is way less than 5 days in a courtroom.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is sort of the main benefit of being able to resolve a case through motions practice. And so I think doing that and understanding your case, your legal theories, the claims is the first and most important thing substantively.
The pitfalls?
Yep, the pitfalls. And because with that, you then go through lines of questioning where, hey, we might have let's say we have a negligence case.
Yeah.
And you've got duty, breach, causation, and damages. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be an issue with respect to them being able to prove duty, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're going to go into your deposition really hammering down on, hey, was there some duty to act? Was there some creation of the harm? Hey, did you act and not continue to act? And if you get no to those things, you've got your summary judgment in the bag at that point in time, because now the evidence and the record and the facts now show, and there's no dispute that there was no duty created by your client. So it's an art. I think it's an art form, and I don't think I'm there yet. I think Gary's very good at it. James is good at it.
Yeah.
Of being able to really close the door on any doubt on certain factual issues in a case. And so that's why I love summary judgment hearings. I love summary judgment motions and memorandums of law, because you could see great lawyers get really creative on how to end a case.
Yeah, so I got a question for David, since you have been in so many depositions. So we got Kevin over here, a sharp-dressed man. He's always got his pocket square. He's showing off his watch. Do you think any of those things matter, in a deposition?
I'm intimidated by Kevin, and I'm on Zoom right now, right? I think they do matter, I will say for a courtroom environment, you got to be careful with that. I think it depends kind of on, frankly, both sides of the case. Don't want to be too showboating. Right. And so I would caution you there on being a little bit too dazzly in front of jurors, because some are turned off by that. But in a deposition suite, I think it's a fight. And there's nothing wrong with coming in there looking like you're ready to throw down.
Yeah, absolutely. Final questions, Tom or Kevin?
Well, just from, and I guess Mike, you'll probably be better suited to to answer this, but Dave, feel free to chime in. What areas do you think that you see lawyers underutilizing the skills and tools that Veritext has at our disposal when we're deposing witnesses, whether it be expert or lay witnesses?
That's a great question. I still think the paperless exhibits is a bit of a hurdle for some people. I think there's a lot more runway on that more people probably could use that than do. The other thing is, I think seeing people capture exhibits in a much more dynamic way. You know, we've seen a lot of on Zoom they're using their own computer, but even in depo rooms they're maybe opening up a spreadsheet and looking through it, or talking about some MRI or something like that, and being able to capture that interaction at the deposition. I think a lot of people don't do. They just have the static exhibit, the static, MRI or whatever. But to be able to see the witness actually drawing or pointing, I think that's something that could be better utilized to get, just more juror interaction, make it easier for them to understand what the heck's going on versus, looking at a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I'd say those are the two big areas.
That's really next level skills. I tell you, that is probably the hardest thing to learn how to do is walk and chew gum at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And when your early career, you're already really nervous, right? Tom, have you ever had an occasion to use, sort of incorporate some items like that?
I really haven't. Again, I talk about a lot of times, and so many of the cases I work on are really genuinely paper cases, but a way to animate's the wrong word, but breathe some life into those static documents, whether that's through a more dynamic use of PowerPoint or integration of the exhibit share, where the deponent can telestrate, for lack of a better word, and digitally mark on these documents and preserve these illustrative exhibits to eventually be provided in summary judgment or in front of a jury.
Well, that sounds like an area we need some training, Mike.
Telestrate. That was a good one. That was a good one, Tom. Telestrate. I like that.
So where can our viewers find your Veritext platform and all of your products, and how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I recommend straight to our website, veritext.com. It's have everything that you need. You can kind of browse around. We have different links for the different types of law. But the other thing I always recommend, come to one of our CLEs. We offer them once a month. They're free, and they're accredited in most states. And you can find those at veritext.com/CLE. And that's where we cover a lot of the technology, and maybe we'll work in some workshops now.
There we go. Mike, Dave, thank you again for joining us. Tom, always a pleasure to sit across the table from you. Misty,
happy to pinch hit anytime James decides he can't be here.
You're 2 for 2 or 3 for 3. Misty, always good to be beside you, whether it be in the courtroom or at the table. As always, like, subscribe, follow us on YouTube and Spotify. We look forward to continuing sharing the lessons that we've learned and our guests have learned on the road to becoming zealous advocates. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zealous Advocate Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to follow us wherever you get your podcasts.